Good evening, Ted. Welcome.
Hi, Lynette.
We're happy to have you back on campus.
It's good to be here, and hello, everybody.
Have you been here recently?
I was here last year for a football game.
For a football game. Great.
From what I remember.
All right.
It was fun. What they tell me.
We won. That's right. That's right. If you were here, yes. We won. Good. Well, we're delighted to have you here, and thanks for agreeing to talk with our students and our guests this evening about your journey and your life, where you are really right now in terms of being a philanthropist. But before we get to that, I'd like to go back to what Sarah started with, which is growing up in Sioux City and the son of a fourth-generation cattleman. So tell us about your early years.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Sioux City, you know, actually there's 5 generations of my family in the cattle business. And Sioux City was a great place to grow up. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We worked hard. You learned kind of the Midwest ethic and Midwest values. I came from a very entrepreneurial family. You know, my dad, I remember he could have went to work for Iowa Beef Processors, actually started by my father's cousin, who begged him to come to work for him. My dad was always too proud to work for anybody else. So, you know, I was raised that you always kind of had to do your own thing, had to take care of people, be a man of your word. In the cattle business, that was what it was about. And it was just a great place to grow up and a great environment to grow up in.
So you started your company there, and how long were you in Sioux City?
I grew up in Sioux City. I was there through, graduated in 1981. I went off to school at the University of Colorado, did a short stint there, all of 1 semester. After 1 semester, I packed up my bags, filled up my 1979 Chevy Blazer, and drove home and announced to my mom that I had good news and bad news. That's why I always started everything with my mom, good news and bad news. Like when I wrecked your car, Mom, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you're going to get a new car. The bad news is that one you had didn't turn out so well. So, you know, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you don't have to pay for me to go to college anymore. The bad news is I ain't going back. Well, that didn't go over so well. So after a lot of hissy fits and threatening, so I ended up at the University of Iowa in 1982, and I ended up sleeping on the floor of Burge for a while and ended up in temporary housing in Reno for a while and bounced around because I just applied to the university. I just like showed up expecting they would take me. Of course they did.
We were happy to have you, I'm sure.
And I never regretted it. And it was actually where I belonged in the first place, and I loved going to school here. So.
What were some of the lessons you took from that time?
For my time here in Iowa City, I mean, I learned a lot. I must admit, I probably wasn't the greatest student, although I did make the dean's list every semester I was here, when I was actually, the semesters I actually finished. But, I mean, it was just such a great group of people. I remember learning so much from the other students, you know, those late night conversations, talking about life where you're trying to figure things out. It was just a great environment. I remember I got asked once, I was speaking to a group of high school students, and one of the students asked me one of the best questions I've ever been asked. He said, you know, Ted, you never graduated from college. Bill Gates, Michael Dell, Zuckerberg, none of these guys graduated from college. Why should I even go to college? And I said, look, if you look at each one of those businesses and each one of those success stories, the genesis of that idea came out of the college environment. Colleges are there for a reason. It's young people all trying to figure it out together. We're all thrown in this world, and they're all working together, trying to figure out you're coming of age, and you're doing things you're not supposed to do. You have freedom the first time. You're still going to class. You're learning. You're changing. And that collegiate environment of people trying to figure it out is where great things happen. And that's why I encourage anybody who's thinking about starting a business to do it at a young age, because it's when you have the energy, it's when you have the best ideas, it's when you don't have any fear of failure, you haven't failed before, you're not afraid of anything, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have the other risks, you don't have the obligations, and you can fail. And that's why you should do it at a young age, and it worked out well for me. So. Tell
us about the genesis of your own entrepreneurial idea for Gateway.
So I was going to school here in 1984, and you know, I remember sitting with friends of mine. I said, "Why are you in school?" And I'd be like, "Well, I'm going to get a job." "I'll get a job." "Well, I'm going to start my own business. I don't really need to get a degree to get a job." So some friends of mine had one friend went to work for a computer store in Des Moines. And he came through and said, you got to come see what these guys are doing. You got to come see this business. And it's like, and I kind of managed this band with these guys and worked with them. And I didn't really manage them, but I hung out with them. And so they said, come and see what's going on at this computer store. So I just had gotten a $2,500 student loan, and I went to check out the computer business. The band was playing on Thursday night. I checked out the computer business on Friday. When I was being interviewed, he said, "Can you start on Monday?" I said, "Sure, I could start on Monday. I just got a job. I don't need to finish school." So I basically quit school, packed my stuff up, moved to Des Moines. That was in November. I went home for Christmas break and told my mom, I said, "Mom, I got good news and bad news." The good news is this time you really don't have to worry about me in school anymore. I'm done. I'm set. Bad news is I'm not going back. I'm not going back to school. But so I worked in that computer store for 9 months, and being the entrepreneurial person that my family kind of dictated, we just make really bad employees. We're just not good employees. I remember at my grandmother's funeral, she had 90-some direct descendants, and I think there was only 3 of them that actually had a job. I mean, we're just kind of unemployable people, but in a good way. So I knew I had to start my own business. So after 9 months working there, I figured I couldn't do it any worse than the guy I was working for. So Mike Hammond and I started it, and it worked out well for us.
So let's go back to your grandmother.
Yeah.
I understand that she was sort of your angel investor.
Yes. Yeah, well, so this was actually a different grandmother that was funeral, but my grandmother that was actually the original investor in Gateway. Mike Hammond and I wrote our business plan, and we went around to banks, to try and get a loan, and they said, "Do you have any money?" And I'm like, "No, I wouldn't want to borrow money if I had money." So they all said no. So they said, "You have to have security." I'm like, "Well, I didn't know anything about that." So my grandmother was kind enough to let us use a $15,000 certificate of deposit for our first $10,000 loan. The banks had so much confidence in us that they would only loan $10,000 on $15,000 cash in their bank. But she was very kind, and I took her out to a lot of nice dinners and took her to church and everything else. She had more confidence in me than the banks, that's for sure.
That's what grandmas are for.
Yes, exactly.
Good. So you built Gateway and ran it for almost 20 years.
Was it that long?
Something like that?
Something like
that. Right?
Yeah, 1985 I retired first in 1999, and then I was gone for a year, and then I came back in 2001.
What are you most proud of about that?
What am I most proud of about my experience with Gateway? I mean, it's mostly about the things that we could do for other people, the things we did for communities. We were a bunch of young people just having a great time in a really exciting industry, and things were changing so rapidly. And when I see people now who have gone on to do great things, and they all talk about the Gateway experience and the ride, and we grew so fast, not the company, but as people, because we did so much in such a short period of time. It was such an incredible industry. And I think it's more the impact I think it had on people, had on the community, and on people's lives, I think is what I'm most proud of today. That's
nice. So I've read, and on the biographical information, some folks call you a maverick. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm darn proud of that, actually.
It's a term that you're proud of. That's good.
Well, I used to have a ponytail when I had hair, actually. So.
I see.
So I think it started then.
Does that qualify as a maverick if you have a ponytail?
Yeah, and we like to break rules. We never followed convention. When people said, and that's look at successful businesses. It's like, it's always been done that way. Nobody's ever done that before. That was the most common thing we got, and we just like to prove people wrong, I think, and so that's where some of the maverick came from.
So many people are familiar with Gateway because of your unique branding and using the Holstein cow pattern on the box. Whose idea was that?
It was a combination of things. So actually I was looking for an ad at one point in time, and I was driving around with a friend of mine who was doing some advertising work for us, and I said, I know, I got it. So we went into my parents' house, and my dad had this picture of his farm on the wall, and I said, Dad, I'm going to borrow this. And I took it off his wall, and I took it to the graphic designer. I said, can you put a computer on here and put Computers from Iowa with a headline? And that was the first cow ad. And it was Computers from Iowa with a question mark, like who would expect computers from Iowa? You just don't expect it. Most people, when you travel around, most people, think they get Iowa and Idaho and Ohio confused, But it resonated with people, and we wrote the text. We're honest, hardworking people dedicated to your complete, total, satisfaction as a customer, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that's possible. And it struck a chord in a time when people were, doing a lot of things different in the industry. So that was the original cow ad. The cow spot was actually developed by a graphic designer. I can't take claim for that. All I can take claim for it, when I saw it on a box, I said, that is amazing. My next question was, how much does it cost? He said, it's black and white, it's not 4-color, it's really cheap, there's no additional price. I said, done. And so I approved it, but I didn't actually come up with the cow spot I designed. But I still have cow spots wherever I go, because the cow spots have been very good to me.
That's great. That's great. It was clearly successful.
And it's still, for us at Gateway, it was kind of that, no matter where Gateway went around the world, we took the cow spots, and it was taking that, Iowa values, those Midwestern values with us wherever. It was our symbol. We were a very values-driven business, and that was kind of the symbol of our values culture that we took no matter where we go, if it was Australia or Ireland or Japan or Malaysia, or California.
So that's a nice segue in thinking about a values-driven business, and then once you sold Gateway, really becoming a full-time philanthropist and values-driven investment in philanthropy. So when do you think you really started to first think philanthropically?
I first started thinking philanthropically, at a young age. It's like I felt a big obligation to give back. I remember sitting with a couple of friends of mine in Sioux City, and one friend was sitting there saying, money is evil, you have to go on and save the world. And the other friend was like, money is everything, you have to make money. And I'm like, I think you can do both, And so, I always hoped I would be in a position to give back. I started my foundation. And Gateway was always a very social business. We were the first company to do a lot of things that weren't necessarily for business. Before I heard the term cause-related marketing, we were always, giving back to our communities and doing a lot of things, because we were nothing more than a group of people and our employees really striving for a common goal. But I started my foundation in 1993, coincided with the year the company went public. For most philanthropy in this country, a lot of it's driven by the tax laws. And for the first few years, I did philanthropic things, but I was busy. And like a lot of philanthropists, I think, as Bruce talked about, there's a lot of people that give money away, but they don't give their time away. So, I did it, and it was mostly run by my sister and those types of things. It wasn't until I retired where, in the 2000s, that I really started dedicating my life to philanthropy. So.
And then how did you choose the things that you wanted to explore philanthropically? You've done a variety of things that are really very interesting.
Yeah, so, I think the foundation originally started doing a lot of community building work. We had a big staff at one point. A lot of people, and it ended up being a lot of what other people were interested in, wasn't what I was interested in so much. My sister had been very active in the foundation, and one of the things, and so when I started looking at it, I said, what have we done that really made a difference? What have we done that was successful? And what we were most known for was our work in violence prevention. We'd really moved the needle in terms of men who would talk to other men about domestic violence. It was a kind of a taboo subject, and we found this kind of bystander men scenario, and and said it was okay to talk to men about domestic violence, to say this is unacceptable, and we actually moved the needle there. So we spun that out and created the Waitt Institute for Violence Prevention. My sister ran that, but I was still kind of looking for my passion. I'm a very experiential type person, and I think most people are. So for me, I kind of have to see something, and to really sink my teeth into it. And I remember when I first retired, I went around, and one of the things where I'm so lucky is I can go, talk to the leading scientists in the world and get their advice and their opinion and learn from them. And I remember I met with two great ocean scientists who were telling me, the coral reefs are dying in the ocean, and this is going to be a catastrophic event. And I'm like, it didn't resonate with me for some reason. It didn't resonate with me until a couple of years later, I was traveling around the world, and I was doing ocean exploration, and I was going to find shipwrecks, and I was going to solve, all these great mysteries. And I started looking around, like, wait a minute, where are all the fish in some of these places? This doesn't look right to me. And then I started talking to more scientists, connecting the dots, and found that the oceans were really one of the biggest problems of our time, how we've decimated the oceans with overfishing, and just pulled out, species at a far faster rate than they can reproduce. It's the only time, with one of the few areas we use, wildlife as a constant food supply. But I also looked at it closer, and it was one of the problems you could fix. It's fixable. Unlike, not to say climate change isn't fixable, we can do things to adapt and make a difference. And it's a huge problem. But it's very tangible by creating marine protected areas. And I like things that you can measure and things that actually work. I learned that fish stocks come back very quickly. It's a very resilient thing, the ocean, and it can change quite quickly. And then outside of that, people can catch more fish, and it becomes healthy. You just have to have some balance to it. So by seeing it, I found oceans was a major thing. And for the last really 7 or 8 years, that's been the primary focus of our foundation. And we've been involved in the creation of something 15, 16, 17 million square kilometers of protected areas around the world. And we've moved it from around 1%, less than 1% of the ocean protected when I started. We're around 10, 11% of the land is in national parks. We've taken it to almost 4% now. So that's a big difference. And we haven't done that alone. We've done that by collaborating and working with a lot of other foundations, a lot of NGOs around the world. But I found the problem, and then I didn't find the problem existed. But for me, it resonated with me as something that I felt. I think as a philanthropist, you look at something and say, first question I always want to ask is can I really make a difference? Can I do something that is going to make a difference by doing this? And I found something where I felt that we could make an impact.
I noticed in the news just recently, the U.S. State Department announced the Our Ocean Conference, and that your foundation was part of that. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in how that came about.
I'm glad you asked me that question. I didn't know she was going to ask me that question. It's interesting. In dealing with ocean conservation, at the end of the day, we're working with governments. And when I started in ocean conservation, I said, okay, we're going to get everybody to work together. And we found out that most of the NGOs, the governmental organizations and the nonprofits, they didn't work together and they didn't really collaborate. And they all just competed for donors, and they all tried to keep things separately. And they all wanted to say they were going to be the ones single-handedly to save the ocean. So I was on the board at National Geographic at the time, and so I used that kind of convening element and the convening power of the National Geographic Society to bring together a group of ocean leaders. But there was no governments in the room at all at that point in time. It was some philanthropists, it was some NGOs, and we were talking about solving these problems, but these problems cannot be solved without governments at the table, because at the end of the day, they have to own the solutions. All we can do as philanthropists is give them the seed capital and the tools and the techniques and the science to really develop the solutions for the long term. So along comes John Kerry when he becomes Secretary of State, and being a longtime ocean enthusiast, he really understood this issue. And in 2 short years, he not only redeemed my faith in government being able to make a massive difference in something, but he's also probably single-handedly done more for ocean conservation than any person by bringing everybody together, governments, the philanthropists, the nonprofits, the NGOs, and get everybody in one room and getting them to make commitments to do things, and then connecting the governments that need the tools and the assistance with the philanthropists, the academics, the scientists, and the people that need it. So it's been really a phenomenal success in my mind. To see the convening power of the U.S. State Department to bring not just the U.S. government, but countries from all over the world together who need help. A lot of them have made commitments to protect 10% of their EEZ, which is their exclusive economic zone, their shoreline that goes out about 200 miles in most places. But they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it, and so we try to give them the tools to do it. But he, I think, single-handedly has done a tremendous job. And as was mentioned by Bruce, it's one of those things. It's like philanthropy. A lot of times it's not always about money. It's about using your time and using your intelligence and getting smart in something. And he's done a tremendous job.
I'm interested in the notion of the power of convening people together and how you were able to do that, but then how you were also able to see the power that the State Department had in doing that. Do you see that in, I've also read about your Pristine Seas initiative work through the National Geographic. Help us understand a little bit about what that focus is.
Yeah, so I mean, the Pristine Seas initiative was led by a guy by the name of Enrique Sala, which is, in my mind, is really the new Jacques Cousteau. He's this swashbuckling, good-looking Spaniard guy with this great accent, and he's also an amazing scientist. And he set out on a mission to save the last pristine seas, last pristine places on the planet. And he's focused on it, he's doing it. He's not trying to create an institution or an organization. He has a start and an end date, and he wants to protect these places, and he's just gone out to do it. And it was one of those things where he and I kind of both came of age in ocean conservation. I started funding him and working with him, and we had a couple failures. We actually had a couple, false starts that weren't inexpensive. But I stuck with him because I believed in him, and we both learned together, and we broadened our net, which I think made us better. It was just him and I trying to do it together, and we're like, no, we need a lot more help, and it really made a difference. In philanthropy, there's a lot of people that want to do something all by themselves, and you can't. You have to work with other people. You have to bring people together, and bring together a diverse set of people, because when you're doing it, you have to not understand just the local needs of the local communities, but you also have to bring a tremendous amount of scientific skills and academic skills to really do it properly and to do it right. So it's a combination of things to make it successful.
So we might naturally assume that people who are willing to invest their philanthropy are looking for fairly safe and conservative bets, but I'm guessing that you're more interested in a little bit more risk-taking with the support that you provide for some of this science.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Lynette. So I think when we first started in ocean conservation, and I think this happens, we probably were more risky. We'd made smaller bets, but we were a little naive, and sometimes we tried to create new things or create new entities, and we found gaps that existed in conservation. Now we're a little more jaded, but we know what works. So I think you have to, when you're looking at philanthropy, invest some small amounts. What I tell other philanthropists when they're looking at it, I say, take your risks and make smaller risks, but learn. And it's okay, you're going to have some failures. They're not always going to be successful. But once you find something that works, focus on it, go for it, and just do it in more places. And that's kind of what we've done, I think, with our foundation in marine protected areas. We've really zeroed in on that as the one thing that really works. We still have some small grant programs and some other things where we'll take higher risks, but for the bigger dollars now, we put it on the things that we know are going to work. We still take risks looking for newer things, but we like to make a difference. So you can do both.
The other science that I know you've been committed to is the work at the Salk Institute, and maybe you could explain the Salk Institute to those who aren't as familiar with it, and then talk about some of the investments that you've made there.
Yeah, I mean, my other passion, I think if you look at, and this you have to learn, and philanthropy is different for everybody. I think what I encourage anybody who's looking at philanthropy is find what you're really passionate about. Find what you think is going to make the biggest difference for you and what resonates with you. And for some people, it's the environment. For some people, it's the arts. For some people, it's education. For some people, it's humanitarian needs around the world. For some people, it's saving wildlife. It can be a variety of things. It's whatever resonates with you. But for me, when I looked around, I found the oceans being really kind of what I saw as the biggest problem that we could impact and make a difference in our time. So that I felt we could make a difference in. The other area that I think holds the most kind of promise for the future right now is just the area of biomedical research. I think it's such a fascinating time right now in biology. There's so many breakthroughs happening that you probably don't hear about on a daily basis, and so many amazing scientists around the world that are, you know, collaborating together and really working in interdisciplinary efforts, and fueled by some amazing technology out there. You know, all these things with big data and all the computing power is coming together to really solve some of the greatest biological problems. And, you know, I do think we will cure cancer in our lifetime. It's just a massive thing, and it shouldn't exist. It's a major problem. I think people are going to understand aging and how we could live longer, healthier lives. With that, people say, oh, well, gee, that could be a problem with too many people on the planet right now. But I think we'll also be able to have healthier food sources and deal with healthier and cleaner type energy out of a lot of the biological research and the technical research that's being done right now. So the Salk Institute is an organization I'm involved with. That's, you know, was founded in 1960. I don't know, you know, the older people in the room will remember Jonas Salk, who cured polio, became a national hero. The younger people might not even know this story, but, you know, the March of Dimes gave him $10 million. The city of San Diego gave him a great site. And Louis Kahn, the renowned, wonderful architect, designed one of the greatest buildings in the world, where scientists could come together and really pursue curiosity-driven research to solve some of these big problems. You know, to solve problems around, you know, neuroscience. How does the brain work? How does it function? How do we deal with all of those types of issues, and, you know, spinal health, and no matter what type of disease it is, they're really driving leading edge research, you know, in a variety of areas with just brilliant minds. So I became very passionate about this. I funded what's a biophotonics center, which is really an imaging center that was funded with the theory of, if you could see inside a cell, you could see, you know, why does a cell turn cancerous? And we're really just giving those scientists the tools. But I've become very involved with the organization, and it's really exciting. I mean, every time I go there and talk to people, I learn more myself. I become more optimistic about things, and it's just a fascinating organization.
So these are two really interesting high science areas, but I know you've also done this really powerful work in violence prevention. And I know you've also continued to support activities in Sioux City. And I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about the application of what you've learned in violence prevention. I know you've sponsored some films as well to try to share that. But then also the work that you've done in Sioux City specifically to try and address some of the issues right there at home.
Yeah, so my sisters led most of led all of our violence prevention efforts through the Waitt Institute for Violence Prevention, and similar to, as I was saying, you know, she really became you know, one of the leading experts on violence prevention, and just kind of dove into it and was very passionate about it, and that was her passion. And I think out of that has come you know, kind of what's now a statewide effort, which started as the Sioux City project, which was a deep project to go into the schools and into the high schools to really educate people at the K through 12 level, particularly high schools. Big focus on athletes with a program called Coaching Boys into Men. We found the thing that coaches were very influential in student athletes' lives, and the student athletes, unfortunately, a lot of times had a lot of energy and created some violence issues at the same time. So for the coaches to come out and tell them that domestic violence and violence in general, you know, off the field was just not acceptable, made a big difference. So we developed a curriculum with the help of a lot of people, and rolled it out in schools across the state, and it's making a measurable impact. The other thing my sister's done is she's been the executive producer of 3 amazingly successful films. One was called Bully. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is a film on bullying. Another one is called Audrey and Daisy, which is on Netflix right now, which is a very sad story. As they're extremely powerful and compelling films. And what we found there, and I did a film on ocean conservation, what we found, the success of the films in a lot of cases was not the films themselves, but but the PR effort around the films and getting people talking about them, like Anderson Cooper held a town hall meeting on bullying, that alone did more than probably the movie. More people saw that than they saw the movie, but the movie was the genesis of those types of things. So it really started getting people to talk about it and raising raising the influence that domestic violence just is not acceptable.
So when we think about the students who are here this evening, who have an interest in thinking about investing their time and one day investing their resources, what are some of the kinds of things that they should be thinking about as students at this stage in their lives?
Yeah, well, I think if you're looking and interested all in philanthropy and you want to make the world a better place, I think first of all you got to ask, what are you good at, and what are you passionate about, and where do you feel that you can make the most difference? As Bruce said, it's not always about philanthropy. It's not always about money. It's a lot of times it's about time, and you can do more with your time. Some of the best philanthropy I see anywhere around the world is people who come from very modest means, and you just I remember my wife and I we took all of our kids one time, we delivered Christmas presents around, and so we delivered Christmas presents to these people who had a wish, and they're like, where are you going? She goes, well, we have to go, so thank you we're all going to the homeless shelter and this were people, and I was like, it was just an amazing moment. They work so hard, and you see just incredible acts of philanthropy around the world that redeem your faith in human nature all the time. And one of my biggest, I wouldn't say philanthropic failures, but one of my early philanthropic lessons was, I donated an astronomical number of computers, personally, not through Gateway, to a thing that Steve Case and I did called Power Up, which was to bridge the digital divide. And we built all these computer centers, and I think it was something like 30,000 computers, and it was, it's 30 computers in like 1,000 places around the country. And so we equipped all these centers, we put in all this effort, and we built them around the world, and then it was kind of a failure. And I'm like, why was this such a failure? We brought the tools right where they needed them, and so I said, I want to know why this didn't work as much, so we did a lot of research, and what we found was the single thing where it worked and where it didn't work got down to people. Who was there? Was there somebody on site that cared about those kids, that had the time, and that made it a great place for them to come? They were tremendously successful, but where there wasn't, and that was in a small percentage of the sites. So you can do an awful lot by volunteering your time and finding something that you're passionate about, and keep it throughout your life. But I think it starts with getting smart about it too, and spending some time on it. My daughter came to me, and she's very passionate about human trafficking. So I'm like, okay, I think this is great. It's a horrible problem around the world, and I encourage all of them to find their interest. When she's 27 years old now, and I said, okay, but you have to take the time. So go meet with all the leading organizations. Go meet the people. Travel around the world. So I actually gave her a travel budget and said go wait for a year and just study the problem before you do anything. And so she's diving into it, and that's what she's doing. So I would say, find what you're passionate about, do your homework, and then throw yourself into it, because you can make a difference. You can make a tremendous difference. One person at a time. If you want to, that's what it starts with. Really, it's just deciding you want to.
That's great. We are going to take some questions because I know that many of you have your own questions that this has elicited. But before we do that, I want to invite Lexi Feener and Sarah back to the stage for a special presentation.
Thank you, Lynette. The Notable Iowan Award was created by the University of Iowa Lecture Committee to honor exceptional individuals who live or are from the state of Iowa and who are proud to claim as part of the University of Iowa family. They are recognized for their life's work to advance our world and change lives. Therefore, on behalf of the University of Iowa Lecture Committee, the UI Foundation, and all of us here in our committee, that I present to you Mr. Ted Waitt with the 2016 Notable Iowan Award. may this commemorative vase serve to remind you of your time here with us on this occasion and our deep gratitude for the exceptional example you provide with your life and work.
Okay, now we have some folks with questions. We have people at the microphones there. That's a little bit easier for us to see with the lights up a little bit. Let's start with our first question.
Hi, my name's Joe Henderson. I'm a senior accounting major here at the University of Iowa. This may be a bit of a dry topic. My question addresses business strategy and philosophy. You briefly mentioned Gateway's cause-driven marketing. In our business curriculum, corporate social responsibility is a prominent theme. Could you elaborate on its value add to businesses, and how do you personally feel it works in harmony with the traditional idea that corporations' sole responsibility is to deliver a return to shareholders?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question of how do you balance off, you know, the multiple constituencies you have when you run a big company. And, you know, your first and foremost thing particularly when you're a public company is you have to take care of your shareholders. But to me, they always balance each other out, because I had three major constituencies: customers, shareholders, and my employees. And around in that was really the communities that we lived in. For me, in order to do, you know, the job that you want for the shareholders, employees, first of all, have to feel proud of who they work for. If they just think the company is out to make a buck, and just out to make a buck at any means, they're not going to do the best job. They're going to be short-term employees. They're not going to be around for long-term, and their heart's not going to be in it. They're not going to be proud of what they work for. They're not going to tell their friends and their family and everybody else to buy products from them, and that you can see when somebody's proud and they're happy when they work somewhere. So I don't think you can be a long-term successful company without having a social conscience and without having some type of a passion. When I see Gateway employees that have been, you know, long gone from the business, they still carry that forward to every business they go to, and sometimes they've seen it in a lot of companies they haven't, where they've worked. But I think we've created a lot of people. But I don't think you can do one without doing the other. I think you have to do it if you really want to be a long-term successful business. So.
Hi, thank you. I'll ask a quick question. Concerning all of your effort and the work of your family in preventing domestic violence, I wonder how you, as a group, you've had a response to having a presidential candidate who has such interesting views on locker room talk.
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, it's very challenging situation. So, you know, to see someone who's in a position, you know, speak about women that way, in a way that you find completely disrespectful, and just unacceptable. And, you know, when you have a candidate on the other side who's basically spent her entire life, and people, you know, think we don't want about her, but I know her well, and she's spent her entire life focusing on women's and children's issues, and that's what's really passionate about. So you have just these complete polar opposites in a very polarizing election and a very polarizing time in this country, and it is very difficult to see someone at that level that still has, you know, a considerable amount of support. Which I guess, you know, I rode my bike across southern Missouri and I saw an awful lot of Trump stickers, you know, and you talk to some of those people and we talk to them and say, okay, I get your frustration. I understand your frustration with the state of affairs, but is this the best way, and is this the best answer? You know, and it's very challenging times that we live in right now. And I think we need somebody who can bring the country together, because, you know, we have a big racial divide. We have a big economic divide. And, you know, we don't need somebody who's a divider right now with that type of thing, you know, at the helm of this country, in my opinion.
Hi, my name is Donovan. I'm a sophomore enterprise leadership major. You had talked earlier about making sure that you work with a diverse group of people. And I guess from a national view, there is a lot of different policies and things like that that are concerned with creating a diverse and inclusive environment here in the U.S., let alone here at the university. And so being a student, and if you are passionate about diversity and creating an inclusive environment for yourself and those around you, and you're not in a place to make policies and things like that, what would be your best advice, I guess, in being able to create that environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, you know, in a place where we have to have discussion to understand each other's problems. There was somebody on CNN last night that's talking, somebody, and I can't quite get the phrase, but when you don't agree with somebody and somebody says something that offends you, I think it's a time when we have to go really talk to them and understand why that is. So, I mean, what can you do? I think you can force a dialogue and force a discussion, more so than anything, because I think that's what we need, and get a group of people together. Through just conversation, I think we can begin to understand the diversity of people and different thoughts, because we all came from somewhere else. We're all, at the end of the day, we're all immigrants in this in this country, and we all have to understand each other's perspective, and only through sitting down and really listening to each other and talking about it. So I think just pulling groups of people together is something I think you can do that. You can make a big difference, not just for yourself, but for them, because I think everybody comes away with all of those interactions differently. And if people are just sitting around talking to people like them, we're not going to get the right answers. We're not going to get the right place. You can sit around and talk about the people the people you're comfortable with, but people have to get outside of their comfort zone and talk to, and really, mix it up sometimes. And that can make a big difference. It's changed my life over the last 20 years. I've traveled around 100 countries and talked to a lot of different people, and I'm a much different person than I was 20 years ago. When I retired, I've learned so much more from seeing things through other people's eyes and other people's perspective. So I think the more you can just do that, the better off everybody's going to be. Thank you.
Hi, Ted. My name is Ben Linden. I am a junior here at the university. Go Hawkeyes. Like yourself, I too am a Sioux City native, and I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for the community. And I was directly impacted myself, as my dad worked for Gateway for many years, so great company. My question is in regards to philanthropy and incentives. Do you believe that charities and nonprofits have become too reliant on incentivization in order to promulgate and grow philanthropic practices? And if not, how much focus should be placed on incentives while maintaining the core values and principles of the particular cause?
So which type of incentives, like fundraising incentives, or?
Like, I know for a lot of different businesses, there's like a tax deduction, or even like a small organization here, they'll say, hey, donate to our cause and we'll give you something in return, or even like businesses do that. So do you think that these incentives should be a priority, or should they try to promote the actual core? Like you said yourself, a value-driven business is what you were part of, so.
Okay, that's actually a great question. So I think, let me just talk a little bit about philanthropy in general, because you brought up the tax environment, so particularly in the U.S. So I do think the tax environment encourages philanthropy, but a lot of times it doesn't encourage the right kind of philanthropy. So, because it doesn't say how you can spend the money, but I do think if we didn't have tax deductions for philanthropic donations, you wouldn't see as strong a philanthropy. And I'm a very strong believer in good private philanthropy, because I think it can make a difference much more so than putting in the hands of the government per se. So I think it can make a difference. You can do higher risk. I see a lot of smart philanthropists out there. Some of the things that these younger philanthropists are doing now with these, the Giving Pledge, and that they're doing things. Mark Zuckerberg just did a $3 billion challenge. We're a very small foundation now. Actually, we're compared to a lot of these other guys that have just lots and lots of money. They're talking about $10, $20 billion. The Gates Foundation is a $100 billion foundation now. Their budget is $5 billion a year. I mean, that's a massive, massive foundation. So, and they're doing tremendous work all over the world, and really good and valuable work. So I think the tax environment and the incentives have created a philanthropic environment. But I think you see different classes of philanthropy out there. So that you do have, are there incentives? I think incentives do encourage philanthropy. So I think you have something I call building philanthropy, which is good. Some people like their names on buildings. It's not engaged, it's not activist philanthropy, but would they give if they didn't have the name on a building? No. Does the organization say, I'll put your name on a building for $100 million? It works good for everybody. So I think that's okay. And even at the lower end, you buy you give your money to World Wildlife Fund and you get a little panda back. There's nothing really wrong with that. It's still doing something better. Something is better than nothing. So You know, you do see also, I call it, you know, party philanthropy, you know, or gala philanthropy, which I find a little distasteful myself, but, you know, they tend to raise 100 million, or 100, say they raise $1 million at a party and they spend 800 of it on themselves and they put 200 to the charity. Is that the best use of time? And everybody feels great that they did something I'm giving to charity? Probably not. You know, you would have been better off giving the $1 million straight to the charity rather than, you know, spending it on fancy food and fancy decor. So, you know, so that doesn't always help. So I think it depends. Are they always bad? No. Are they always good? No. So it depends on the right use of incentives, I think, for the right reason, whether it's really effective or not. So.
Okay. Hi, Ted. My name is Mike Klug, and I have a question about careers in philanthropy. A good friend of mine works for a foundation and has really enjoyed it. And I'm wondering if you could just talk about how your foundation uses staff, what kind of work people do for the foundation.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's about careers in philanthropy. You know, it's a tough field, and like I said at one point, we had 14, maybe 18 people total in our foundation at one point. I took the foundation down to one person, and we ended up doing our best work, because I became very focused on what we were doing with less people rather than more people. And now I think we maybe have, you know, 4 or 5 full-time people. But there are some great careers in philanthropy. If you're prepared to dedicate your time and money and dedicate your life to something, you can make a huge difference out there. In the foundation right now, we're a grant-making foundation, so we have a very small staff. We like to keep our overhead very, 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 very low, far less than 10% of our grants budget, and we do a lot of the work ourselves. We do have an operating foundation as well. That actually has more employees, much smaller budget, but we're doing the work ourselves. So we actually operate like an NGO, and that's where most of our people are. So we have, you know, a scientific lawyer who runs the operation. We have some oceanographers that work in the space. You know, we have some operations people that work in the space. I would love to see, you know, a combination of business skills. Let me spin your question around to what does the philanthropic community really need in great employees? What I don't see as much as I would like to see is good, solid business skills in the philanthropic side, good organizational skills, good executional skills. That could go a long ways in the philanthropic community. And if you combine that with a scientific aptitude with business of understanding science, because almost everything that we has to have some scientific backing in it. Even the violence prevention work we do when you're talking about, you know, psychology, through the ocean conservation, which is heavily dependent on biology. We work a lot with economists as well too in that field. At the Salk Institute, we're dealing with, you know, chemists and neuroscientists and biologists. So, but I think combining business skills with the scientific aptitude is kind of the sweet spot for philanthropy as far as I'm concerned. And we need more good people in philanthropy. I will make a call for that. And the pay's not that bad. It's really not that bad.
Hi, thanks. I really enjoyed your talk, and I thought it was really inspiring that you have such a wide array of interests. I'm Angela, and I'm a senior in biochemistry and statistics, so this question's a little different from the ones that have been given. And so I guess you said you touched upon big data, and right now I think that's a sexy word that's been thrown around here and there. But what do you think is the greatest potential that big data has on biological research?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, there's a combination of things that big data can really do. You're seeing the computing power and the storage capability change things so quickly. So some of the first things that you're seeing big data change biology is really just in imaging, because it's so deeply processor intensive and storage intensive. And you're seeing now where you can model things better than you can actually see them. So you can take pieces of data and pieces of information and model, you know, living cells, cancer cells, viruses, how do they behave in the system? And you can see it in ways that you could never see it before, and you could never see it, you know, live in a human. because you just can't get it at that type of resolution, and things are too complex. So I think it starts there, and then it goes to connecting the dots and adding the pieces from full disease models, full human models, full brain models. Some of the things that Google's DeepMind is doing in terms of artificial intelligence is just fascinating, and they think they'll be able to solve a tremendous number of the problems just strictly with computing power. I think we're a ways off from that. I don't think we're going to replace human technology anytime soon, but I think it is going to be computing power, and that's where I felt proud to be part of the computing industry. It's grown up so quickly now, but the computing power and the capability that has progressed so far beyond where it was is the tool that the smart people, the smart biologists and chemists that have the intelligence to ask the right question is going to give them the answers to that question. So.
Great questions. Thank you so much. One more?
Thanks for talking to us tonight, Ted. My twin brother asked the question about incentives, so I too am from Sioux City. My name is Alex Linden, and growing up in Sioux City, I see the impact that Gateway has had on the community. I drive by the big Gateway factory with the cow spots every time I go out to my grandma's, and I love hearing about Gateway, and I love that I got to hear you speak tonight, because it's a big part of Sioux City and all those who were raised there. So part of that is I see former employees of Gateway making big impacts in the community and contributing to lots of different philanthropic causes. So my question would be, what kind of a role do you think a business or employer should have in getting their employees involved in philanthropy?
In philanthropy? Yeah, what kind of role should a business play in getting their employees involved in philanthropy? I think there's a lot of things that employers can do. First of all, you have to instill the spirit. You have to give people time off if they need it, and incentivize them to give the time off, and give them credit for it, and pay them for it to go volunteer in places and to take their skill sets, go mentor people, go learn. It has to start at the top of an organization, and you have to realize that it's going to come back to you tenfold if employees come back excited and feel good about what they do. So you can help them donate their time. You can also do what we've done both through our foundation we did at Gateway, was do a matching contribution fund. If you donate something, we'll match that, so you can leverage their contributions, and you can help them give their time. So I think you can do a lot, and it also comes from seeing what the company does. Sometimes you don't know something until you see it happen. So I think what happened to a lot of those people, fortunately, at Gateway, that at least I hope happened, they would see us doing something, and they would say, God, that felt good. That really felt good. I like that. I want to do more of that. And all companies should do that, and we should spend our time doing that. And then they went out and did it some more, and it's kind of that pay it forward thing, and it goes on and on. So, hopefully we had a little bit in inspiring people to do that, and I'm glad to hear that they're still doing that. That makes me very, very happy.
Thank you, Ted. You've really inspired us. First, your story as an Iowan and as a Hawkeye, and then sharing with us the way that you've been able to build a company and to be a philanthropist who's helped change the world. And we're proud to call you a Hawkeye, and we thank you for being with us this evening. Please join with me in thanking Ted Waitt.
Thank you. Good. Go Hawks!